Fight!
Welcome to the New Game Plus podcast. Probably need to do that again.
No.
Alright,
I hope I don't laugh through half of this.
this is the New Game Plus podcast. This is the very first inaugural episode of a weekly podcast. My name is Dustin.
Are we just doing once a year? You said inaugural.
Weekly. Inaugural
Okay.
means first. I don't think that means annual.
Oh, I'm a retard.
Learn the English
And my
language.
name's Kenny.
And that was very offensive to retards.
Sorry, all you.
Do I need to be a little more PC?
Yeah, well, maybe they won't listen.
That's
And
fair.
I'm Nolan.
And together we are.
Stupid for doing this.
That's a good attitude to have. Thank you for being stupid with us and listening to this podcast. Someone want to explain kind of what this is and what we plan to do with this podcast?
Kenny?
Oh yeah, a podcast, for those of you who don't know, is
They know what a podcast is.
is a great way to listen to things that are worthwhile. So, don't know what you're doing here, but we're going to talk about games because we all love games, and old games because I don't know, nostalgia. Or something.
So specifically old games. So the whole idea of New Game Plus is that we are going to talk about retro games. So, and for us, that means 15 years or older. The game has to be 15 years or older, and those are the games that we will talk about. We're not professionals to any degree and in any field of life, but when it comes to video games, we enjoy them, and we've all been playing for many years, and so we've got, nostalgia to some of these older video games that we are going to, this is kind of the format. So we will spend a week playing these games, not a week straight, but, multiple hours throughout the week playing a retro video game. And then we'll come together at the end of the week and we'll start recording and talk about the things that, we enjoy, the things that we didn't enjoy. We'll talk about, the concept of the game itself, and we'll move into the gameplay, kind of the mechanics of the game, and then we'll talk about how it aged, or did it age well, did it not age well, should it stay in prehistoric times, or should you go back and give it another play, and then we'll kind of just summarize our thoughts on that before, at the end of the podcast, we will randomly select the next game that we are going to play, and then discuss the following week. Is that about right, men?
Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, it sounds great.
right.
All right, so talk.
We'll talk about video games, and then we'll play another one, and then talk about it.
Yeah, it's a very simple premise, but we're gonna see how that works. Think it'll be fun. So you ready for the first one?
Yep.
Mostly.
Okay.
Overview.
Well, our first game was not randomly selected. We kind of just talked it out, and the first game that we played was Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim.
It's a great idea.
It was a beautiful idea. For those of you that don't know, Earthworm Jim is a game that came out in 1994 for Sega Genesis. And since then, it's come on different consoles, and as well as, I think there's a PC version as well. And it's just a run and gun platformer where you are an earthworm in a robotic suit who battles the forces of evil. Is that about right?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't tell you the premise. I didn't read anything about it. I just played it, and I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's there's various stages, and in between each stage there's a mini game called Andy Asteroids, which is the worst, and it's really not that long of a game if you can get past the second level.
I felt like this was a good game to pick though, because it's like smack dab in the middle of the era that we want to talk about, and to me is like showed not only like some influence from games beforehand, but seemed like itself was an influential game in terms of other games that came out. I don't know about you guys, because you mentioned the mini game, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little more, but Andy's Asteroids. Like, whoever made Final Fantasy VII and the Chocobo races
Yeah.
and the whole little set of mini games,
You're right.
I guarantee you spent hours of their childhood hating Earthworm Jim.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just, it feels like it was kind of a cool one in terms of, like, it feels like Super Mario Brothers meets Sonic the Hedgehog meets Battletoads meets, like, somebody was on drugs in a junkyard and then made a video game.
Do you want to know what's interesting? You said I think you said Super Mario, and then you said Sonic, and I honestly think, if I recall correctly, if I remember reading this, that this was response to some of those games. They were hoping to come out with an iconic character and game that would be able to stand the test of times.
And they chose an earthworm over a plumber.
An earthworm named Jim.
That's hilarious.
All right, what's the story and the premise of the game?
I feel like Nolan's got a good grasp on this, so I'll let him start.
I'll give you my overview of the story.
Yeah.
You're obviously an earthworm. You have a gun. I believe that's about it. And
There's actually 2 weapons.
Okay. Well, yeah, himself. He whips people with his head.
Well, no, with himself.
Or bodies. Yeah.
So Earthworm, the character is Earthworm Jim, obviously, but he's only the head portion of this robotic spacesuit.
So, yeah. Something.
Yeah, sure.
And so one of the weapons is him the suit grabbing him and whipping him. So yeah, continue.
And there's angry creatures that are angry at you, but I don't know why. And you shoot them and whip them and start off in a junkyard, new Junk City?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. And that's all I got. So it's a great story. And
what I liked about the suit is the fact that it was, like, sort of sentient. Like, when the worm isn't in it, it still walks around and waves and does things.
Right.
And it made no sense to me. I didn't know who was in charge. I definitely wasn't in charge because I was playing this thing on a computer and buttons are hard and I was just terrible at it.
Yeah. So there's really only one central character, I guess, and that's Jim. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And a spacesuit, and then there's villains. So I don't even know. And then in Andy Asteroid, which is this mini game that's played between each and every stage, you're racing. You're in a spaceship, and it's different from all the rest. It's not like a side to side scroller. It's what would that be called? I don't know. Just you're zooming forward away from the screen, and
yeah, it's the Sonic the Hedgehog ripoff.
Oh,
it reminds me a little bit of like Sonic going for rings, a little bit of like a what eventually would become like, I don't know, Dance Dance Revolution or one of those games where things are like falling at you and you're like catching them.
Yeah.
I don't. It was weird.
I don't know if y'all caught on to it, but I guess that chicken thing that you're racing is named Andy, and he can get so far ahead of you, but the computer does not allow you to get so far ahead of him. And so he's always going to stay on your tail. Yeah. So it's kind of a hard minigame, and if you don't beat him in the race, you have to fight him. Did y'all know that?
I didn't know that.
Oh no, I didn't get far enough in the game myself to actually ever play the minigame.
It's after every stage.
You didn't beat the first?
I didn't finish the first level.
Okay. Well,
I tried a lot of times.
I didn't know you had.
It was harder than it should have been.
I didn't know you had to fight the chicken thing. I beat him. Well, like it goes to a different minigame where you fight him.
Yeah, you have to
fight
a boss. Like a boss.
Okay.
So let's talk about that then. We can just move into the gameplay because obviously we're already talking about it.
Gameplay.
you can hear from us that it's a difficult game. It's not an easy game, and you can tell that from Kenny not finishing the first stage.
In my defense, I did get better as I went. The first time I played through, I took like 4 steps and then I died, and I was like, retro gaming is terrible.
Yeah, well, okay, so I think Nolan and I, just briefly from talking, we made it past the first stage, but the second stage is a lava stage, which provides a bunch of difficulties in and of itself.
As far as I'm concerned, the second stage is the final stage of the game.
Yeah.
That's the raid boss.
Well, it's not linear. So like
you get lost.
The stage leads you down, and then you can't go any further. And so I'll be honest here. I got stuck on this stage for 2 days, and then I had to go and look up a walkthrough on GameFAQs.com. If you want to sponsor us, please email me. And had to figure out, do y'all even know that when you jump, if you press the jump button again, then your head starts to do a helicopter, and you descend slowly. Do you know that, Kenny?
I did know that. I discovered that by accident, which is my favorite way of learning about things in video games.
Yeah.
Though this one, you definitely needed to do way more of that than you should. Like, I know video games have come a long way in, like, their design and, like, teaching you to play as you go or giving you some kind of tutorial. But this one, there were, like, mechanics that you needed to know to be able to succeed. Like the fact that you could whip your little worm head, I don't know what to call it, whip, and, like, grab things in the environment and swing on it, and things that, like, aren't evident without, like, stumbling upon them or seeing someone else play it. And I kind of love and hate that.
I didn't find the helicopter thing helpful. Like, you said you used it a lot, but where?
Well, exactly. You didn't finish the second stage, did you?
No,
Well, Kenny, you didn't finish the first stage.
No, I did not finish the second stage.
Yeah, so the way to do it is you have to, once you get, down low is not how you get out. You gotta move back up, and then there's a small ledge that the only way to get to it is to jump off a hill and to copter to it. And then the exit to the stage is actually at the top, north, like way high.
See, I was going down and never found anything.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of things though like that throughout the game, where it's like if you don't know, finding it or discovering it for the first time would be really, really difficult. I talk like I played through the whole game because I got frustrated that I couldn't beat the first level, and so I watched a playthrough of the game. So like I'm not Dustin. I tend to be a purist. I tend to try and, like, play a game and just enjoy it, whereas no one's surprised that he went and looked up a guide.
Yeah.
You guys will learn that he's sort of that guy.
Well, like if I was playing Minesweeper, I might look up a strategy guide.
It's true.
Optimal strats.
So, I finally, after 2 days of trying, got past the lava stage, and just when you think there's some relief, the stage directly after that is an underwater stage, Nolan.
No.
Yes, and
not a water stage.
We all know that underwater stages have always been the worst, most difficult stages.
Yeah.
And
they're always bad.
And Earthworm Jim is definitely falls into that line of thinking because go ahead.
It's a hard game already, and then since none of us own Segas, we were playing it on, some version of emulator. I just did a Flash-based version online. And so, like, you also don't have the feel of a controller and the buttons and the things that make it feel a little more intuitive if you were playing the game for the first time.
Right.
Or on a Sega. And so that's an interesting sort of piece of just retro gaming and how, like, you can go back and play the games, but it doesn't ever feel quite like it would have if you were playing it natively.
Yeah, so, like, based on the controller setup, I don't know about you guys, but each encounter with the, enemies, like you, Kenny, you said you died several times at the beginning, and I know why. It's because that little bug that is flying around, I found it really, really hard to, like, hit enemies with the gun or with the whip or anything.
Yeah, it was tough.
let's talk about that real quick since we're talking about gameplay and mechanics. And we've already said, but you can jump, you can shoot a little blaster gun that can sometimes within the stage you can get a few power-ups for that. Well,
It's like a rocket launcher.
yeah,
power
it's
up.
kind of like a rocket laser maybe power up, and you can use one of those for each of those that you get, and then you can whip your head, which we talked about, which is super powerful. It's just really hard to aim without a controller, I found. And then you can helicopter, which doesn't do any damage, but it helps you get to distant places.
And to note again, I had mentioned it, but you can also grab things in the environment and interact with things in the environment with your whip. So you can like
With
move
his head,
things and grab things and with your face, with your worm body.
Which is kind of hilarious.
Yeah, and swing and move. And anyways, that's an important piece of like solving the puzzles of the levels.
But okay, now Kenny, once again, you didn't finish the first boss, but Nolan, did you notice that like okay, so there's sometimes there's bosses in the middle of the stage, which there's a title for that, and
Mini boss.
Yeah, okay, mini boss, and then at the end of the stage there's a boss. But each of those, they have a unique way that you've got to beat them, which is annoying.
Yeah, the trash can mini boss. That one's. I thought that was the end of the stage when I first played it because it was very difficult. But yeah, you have to like use the power ups, or you don't have to, but I found that helped.
Well, and okay, so the trash can mini boss, he tries to attack you and he's stable, and then he starts rolling. And if he touches you, if he hits you, then you take damage like you normally would, but then that also resets him. You can't get hit by him.
That's way too hard.
That's the first boss.
Yeah.
The first boss that Kenny never got to.
I definitely feel like as a game, it was a game that they tried to do everything, and because of that, it became really difficult.
Totally.
Like, it's not just a shooter, but it's also, each level's kind of its own puzzle, and you also have to have, good reaction time, and like, it's just, it's busy and complex. I think a little too much, if anything. Aged.
Now, let me. I've got to ask, and maybe this is moving over into our next section, and maybe this is where we're just going into to talk about if it aged well or not. But do you think that we're saying this just because we're so far removed from these kinds of games, or do you think that really this is a good understanding and interpretation of how difficult this game actually is and was?
I think that we are like babied with the games we have now. Like, for instance, one of the new Mario games, I think it's for like the 3DS or something, but like if you die so many times, it will give you like this invincibility power up that you can just go like through enemies and jump farther and stuff like that and make it pretty much easy mode. So like I think that has something to do with the difficulty we're feeling. Like, the game is really hard. I'm not taking away from that. Yeah, it's really hard. But I also think that for some games we are used to like being given the easy route.
Yeah, we don't have to earn it anymore. Like, I remember playing games back in the day and just grinding them out, just playing them again and again and again and again. And I think game design these days tries to avoid that, but I almost kind of miss it. I think that some of the appeal of a retro game is you feel like you earned it,
Yeah, 10-year-old me would have like sat down with this game forever until I beat the second stage and then third. But that was when I had more time. And
third is as far as you would have made it, though.
Right.
That would have been your whole summer one year, is
second
getting to stage 3.
Second stage is the end of the game. Third stage is like the bonus stage.
Exactly.
Well,
10-year-old me. Okay, well, hey, let me ask this. Nolan, was this the first time you've ever played this game?
Ever.
Kenny,
I knew of the game, and it's the first time I played it, though.
Kenny, was this the first time you've ever played the game?
I'm not sure. I think I may have played it once or twice in the past, but it's been years ago. It seemed familiar.
Yeah. Nolan, you said 10-year-old you. This was 10-year-old me that went to take one video and rented this game, brought it home to play, and I've got a terrible memory, but clearly I didn't beat that. The 10-year-old me, I imagine, tried to play this for just a little bit, enough to remember how insane this game is, just in kind of like the creation, just the various aspects of it, enough to remember that and have that ingrained in my mind. But I mean, I would not have been successful with it back then, just as I was not successful with it this time around.
No, yeah, that makes. I mean, what I said holds up, but like this game was like obviously really hard, so maybe it's not because we've been babied, but
yeah,
that just came to mind because I know a lot of these games are can seem hard nowadays.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, games back in the day were way tougher. Like, I remember spending hours playing Battletoads and just feeling like I was a worthless human.
So
or
is
like
it more rewarding?
trying to pass the first level of Top Gun on the original Nintendo and legitimately thinking it was impossible.
Yeah, no, I heard your question on. I see. I think it would be. I think a common complaint that I see and hear from people today is that a game held your hand too much, or that at the beginning, the first hour and a half was a walkthrough of how
Too
to use
forgiving.
and how to use these buttons and what to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people complain and say that they want something that doesn't baby you up front and allows you to learn these mechanics even on your own.
There's respect to be seen there.
Yeah,
About
I
these
agree.
games.
I just think we're so far removed from it and so accustomed to this other way that that just it kind of just grinds on us a little bit more.
Right.
I think my if we were to say my complaints with the game have less to do with its difficulty, because I really like that in games, but more to do with just the fact that I felt like they were trying to accomplish everything with this game.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like it knew what it wanted to be. So, and playing that, and it's already kind of weird, and then not playing it with the original controller where I felt a little disconnected and like I couldn't like interface with it intuitively. It was kind of a frustrating experience on a couple of fronts.
I will say the art style to me was pretty impressive considering the time it came out. Like
absolutely.
Cartoony like backgrounds and backdrops. I really like that art style.
So do y'all think that it aged well or not? Do you think it's a game that you would encourage people to play again today, and for what reasons would you or would you not encourage that?
Kenny?
I think I would, but hesitantly, just because like it's a great example of kind of games in that era, and it is fun. Like, the character is intriguing, and they did some kind of cool things with it, and especially if you like a game that's a little bit of a challenge, and you're willing to kind of replay something and sort of figure out a puzzle, and then go back and replay it again, and then beat that puzzle, and then progress it, kind of play games more like we did back in the day, and sort of put some time into it. I think it's an enjoyable game. There's a reason it kind of went down as a classic of sorts, but it's also got a lot of frustration that comes with it in terms of just being difficult and a little confusing and a little just busy. A lot of things that they're trying to do, and so it might be for some. I wouldn't say it's a game for everybody. It's definitely not a must play in my mind.
Nolan?
I'd have to agree with Kenny. It's definitely noteworthy because of how unique the character and the environment and premise and gameplay is even. However, the gameplay may not be so accessible now. So maybe overall it didn't age, as well as other games did, but still fun. It's a fun play, fun idea.
Here's the thing that's intriguing to me, and I don't know if y'all are aware, but apparently, obviously this game wasn't to the same caliber as Mario or Sonic as maybe the creators desired for it to be, but something happened because there were multiple spin-offs of this game. Spin-offs, I mean, there was Earthworm Jim 2, Earthworm Jim 3, and there might have even been more. There were remakes of this original one. Like, maybe not
They've gone back
HD.
and like re-released it and things as well.
And then on top of that, I believe that there was a cartoon on television.
Yeah, there's an adaptation, an animated series.
So like
Now that I would watch.
So like I think maybe I don't know if this is too strong of a word or an idea, but like maybe a cult classic to a degree. Like I think that there's there's a select group of people that would have had a connection with this game back in the 90s that would enjoy going back and playing it today. But I don't think that the majority of people today, I don't think the Minesweeper generation maybe would enjoy something like this. I think they would enjoy some of the elements, but I think they'd have some of the same frustrations as us and maybe not even get past the first or second stage.
Right. Can I clarify?
Sure.
I am of the Minesweeper generation. Pretty sure you're talking about Minecraft.
Did I say Minesweeper?
You did, and I was like, I'm the only person that actually plays Minesweeper. And I gotta say, if we put that on our list of retro games, I wouldn't complain.
Well, if you go back and listen to this podcast, I said Minecraft. Because are you gonna fix it in post? I've got post editing powers, man. I think just because of the challenge, I think it's a fun game. I think that there's interesting elements, but I don't think that the mechanics probably and the difficulty has allowed it to age as well as some of these older, more nostalgic retro games. Yeah, I agree. You look at games like Sonic and Mario, there is, or other old kind of classics, and there's difficulty there, but you don't feel like it's frivolous or impossible. And though this wasn't to that level, there were moments that it was just like, what's going on? This is too much. Yeah. Groovy. So, yeah. Speaking of, did y'all ever not move Jim in enough time for him to do one of his animations, like one of his waiting animations?
I didn't think to do it.
They've got at least 4, maybe 6 of them programmed, and some of them are pretty ridiculous. So if you have time to do that, that's worthwhile, and we'll make those kind of things are some of the appeal to the game for sure. Yeah, it's right at the beginning of the very first level, you launch a cow like up into the sky. Yeah, like what is going on? So hilarious. Can you explain to Nolan, because he doesn't even know how that cow comes back into play? Oh, well, I don't want to ruin it for some. The game's been out for 25 years. Yeah, we're not ruining anything. Well, it's just you see the cow again. It's kind of it's. Is that how you're gonna leave it?
How do you know? Why not? You didn't beat the first level.
He said he watched.
I watched the whole game through. I told you this.
Kenny, you think we need a reserve for spoilers and games and retro games?
Yeah. That's an interesting conversation.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. You see the cow throughout the game, and then you see him in the final scene.
Well, then that's brilliant.
It's those kind of things of the game. I agree.
Absolutely. It's that fun appeal, the weirdness and the art aesthetic and
which I love.
The fact that gameplay changes, there's one whole level where you do it in the dark. There's a whole underwater level. There's a level where you're in a spaceship. It's just so creative. I just knocked it a little while ago for trying to do too much. And from a how they did it point, I still think that that's the case. But it is really diverse and really creative in what they tried to do. I might be totally wrong on this in regards to timing, but I just feel like it hit this niche in the day when All Real Monsters was a thing, and Ren and Stimpy, that kind of whole vibe.
Yeah, it's got that vibe to it for sure.
Absolutely. It just reeks of the mid-90s.
Yeah. And reeks very pleasantly.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, alright, so let's sum it up. The final shell shock. On a scale of whatever you want, what would you rate it, Kenny?
Oh gosh, I didn't know this was coming.
Scale of anything I would want, yeah. I would rate it. Anything. Okay. I'd rate it like a solid, maybe. Yeah. All right. Do you want to expand on that, or you just want to leave it at that? No. Maybe they knew what they were doing. Maybe they did. Maybe you want to play this game. Maybe you don't. That's a really. Maybe I beat the first level. Maybe I didn't. All right, beautiful. Maybe.
But definitely didn't.
Nolan, completely different scale. What do you rate it?
A way better one, because mine was terrible.
Why don't I just use numbers instead of being weird?
You can use a number.
Yeah, it's your scale.
Okay. 7.
I'm assuming that was a scale from 3 to 30.
What 1 to 100?
You
Three,
say
3 to 30.
3 to 30. Rate it.
Yeah. You wanna expand on that any, or you just?
No.
Yeah. Okay. And see, I would just give it a solid flying cow.
Okay.
That pretty much sums it up. Like, that was kind of the game.
All right.
Was the flying cow.
So, okay, and we've already discussed, but does anyone want to elucidate, thank you very much, on favorite elements or like least favorite elements? For example, my favorite element, and I think Nolan touched on it briefly, but that I really liked the art style. I think the art style provided a uniqueness that would set this game apart from some of the other kind of just run and gun side scroll adventures in the 90s. I liked the art style, which goes from, yes, the drawings, but also the sounds and the soundtrack and all this. For example, in the second stage, which is a lava stage, and I spent multiple days on, in the background is the end boss of that stage, and it's a cat that's licking itself in the background, but it's far in the background and you might not even notice it, but it's back there in the entire stage. And then you come back to it and you fight that cat at the end of that stage, and that cat sometimes takes breaks in trying to attack you and grooms itself. It's some of those things that just made me enjoy the game the most.
Absolutely. It's a fun game for being a game that's kind of not fun.
Yeah.
Favorite elements. The art style, as I already said. The music was kind of fun. I'm a big soundtrack guy. I love game soundtracks, and I mean, there's by no means is that some kind of like phenomenal soundtrack, but I noticed the music being fun, so those are my 2.
Pretty much all the times the worm jumps around outside of the suit.
Yeah.
Stinking adorable.
And then you
Best
have
part.
and you can't do anything. All you can do is spring jump, and then you've got to get reunited with your suit and jump back into the slot where the head belongs.
And it feels so good.
All right. So at the end of every week's podcast, we are going to randomly select from a list of games that we've compiled of retro games 15 years or older, and we've started the list. We've got about 6-7 games on here that are older than 15 years old that we've just kind of thrown into, and yeah.
For those guys listening, it's a pretty mediocre list. We literally just have suggested things that we either remember playing or that someone has mentioned. And the rule is just that old and a game.
Right.
Like, I put a PC game that I fondly remember from my childhood on the list that we definitely need to do at some point. There's console games. It's wide open, but our list is really, really, really lacking.
Really lacking. And so this is where you can help most. We've got an email for the podcast. You can email ngppodcast@gmail.com. ngppodcast@gmail.com. That just stands for New Game Plus Podcast, NGP Podcast. And you can send us some suggestions of games that you'd want us to include on the list. And really, if it's older than 15 years old and has some kind of story elements to it, so it's not a fighter,
Yeah.
not just a straight up puzzle game, then we'll include
anything worthwhile.
Yeah.
I mean, if something's notable, yeah.
So, for
let us
example,
know.
Snake might not be that interesting of a game.
Well, speak for yourself.
I could spend half an hour just talking about memories of Snake as a child, like
none of
the
us want
DOS
that.
version.
Well,
That's true.
tune in for next week's podcast as Kenny talks about Snake.
I won't be here.
All right, so I'm going to hit the randomize button, and we'll get our game that we'll play for the next 7 days before we meet together again and record a podcast.
Great.
Here we go. 3, 2,
Yeah.
1. And are you kidding me? All right. The second game.
Did I get my wish?
No, someone else did. The second game we're playing is Half-Life, the original Half-Life, which is older than 15 years old, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so somehow we're gonna have to.
I've never played this game. How did I never play Half-Life?
Well, you're in for a treat.
Nor have I. I've never played it in my life. Have you, Nolan?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. I love it.
Well, we will over the next 7 days, and then we'll record another podcast, and it will be all about Half-Life. All right. Anything else y'all want to say before we leave?
No, yes, we promise this will get better. We're kind of new at it, and
We can't
Yep.
promise that.
Speak for yourself. I'm gonna get
We
worse.
we can't promise that, Kenny. You're
Okay,
gonna
we
start throwing in puns, and everything's gonna go downhill, and we'll quit.
we promise that we'll have more fun at least, even.
Yeah.
I
And
got nothing.
audio quality will be better too. Just send your donations to ngppodcast
Why
at
are you hating on
gmail.com.
me?
No, we're fine. All right. Well, thank y'all for listening, and tune in next week for as we meet together and talk about Half-Life.
Love
And
you.
to all you Earthworm Jim fans out there, if you're angry that we didn't love your game and we're bad at it, please don't send us hate mail.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.